There's something deeply primal about camping, isn't there? The crackle of a campfire, the vast, star-filled sky overhead, the feeling of being one with nature. It's an escape from our modern lives, a return to something simpler. But what happens when that peaceful escape turns into a real-life nightmare? What happens when the rustling in the bushes isn't a squirrel, and the shadow you see just beyond the firelight isn't a tree? The 6 stories we're about to explore are exactly that, moments when the comforting darkness of the wilderness became a stage for something truly terrifying. These aren't just campfire tales. They are real encounters, caught on camera, where the thin fabric of a tent was the only thing separating campers from the unknown. Imagine for a second that you're out there, you're miles from civilization, your phone has no service, and the only sounds are the chirping of crickets and the whisper of the wind. Now imagine a new sound joins that chorus, something that doesn't belong, a twig snapping under a heavy foot, a guttural scream that rips through the silence, a flicker of light where there should only be darkness. These campers didn't have to imagine it, they lived it. They had the presence of mind to hit record, capturing moments so unsettling they will make you think twice before you ever zip up your sleeping bag again. So turn down the lights, get comfortable, and prepare yourself. We are about to venture deep into the woods, where the line between a peaceful getaway and a fight for survival becomes terrifyingly thin. These stories serve as a stark reminder that when you step into the wild, you're stepping into a world that operates by its own rules. And sometimes, you're not just an observer of nature, you're also being observed. Let's dive into these 6 creepy camping moments that were actually caught on camera. Our first story takes us to a dense forest where a couple, let's call them Mark and Sarah, were enjoying what they thought would be a secluded weekend getaway. They had hiked for hours to find the perfect spot, far from any trails, a place where they could truly disconnect. As night fell, they settled into their tent, the gentle sounds of the forest lulling them into a state of relaxation. But around 2 a.m., Mark was jolted awake by a sound that didn't fit. It wasn't an animal. It was the slow, deliberate crunch of leaves, one step at a time, getting closer. His heart began to pound in his chest as he strained his ears, confirming he wasn't dreaming. Sarah was still asleep, oblivious to the approaching threat. Mark, trying not to panic, quietly reached for his phone. He didn't want to make a sound, but he knew he needed evidence, or maybe just a light. The footsteps stopped right outside their tent, so close he could have reached out and touched whatever, or whoever, was there. The silence that followed was somehow even more terrifying than the footsteps. He could hear his own ragged breath, the frantic thumping of his own heart. He fumbled with his phone, his fingers shaking as he swiped to the camera app, his thumb hovering over the record button. He aimed the lens towards the thin nylon wall of the tent, where a shadow was beginning to form. Then, he saw it. A tall, slender silhouette was cast against the side of the tent by the faint moonlight. It was unmistakably human-shaped. The figure stood perfectly still, just standing there, watching, waiting. Mark's blood ran cold. Who would be out here, in the middle of nowhere, at this hour? Every terrifying possibility raced through his mind. Was it a lost hiker? Or was it something far more sinister? He held his breath, his phone recording the terrifying tableau. The figure remained motionless for what felt like an eternity before it slowly, silently, turned and walked away, the footsteps fading back into the oppressive darkness of the woods. For our next story, we join a group of 4 friends on their annual camping trip in a remote mountain range known for its pristine beauty and eerie silence. They had spent the day laughing, fishing, and sharing stories around a blazing campfire. As the fire died down to glowing embers, they retreated to their respective tents, feeling safe and content. But the mountain's silence was about to be broken in the most horrifying way imaginable. Just after midnight, one of the campers, David, was woken up by a sound that made every hair on his body stand on end. It was a scream. Not a human scream, not quite an animal scream, but something agonizing and blood-curdling that echoed off the surrounding peaks. David sat bolt upright, his heart hammering against his ribs. He unzipped his tent just enough to peek out, seeing his friends doing the same from their tents a few feet away. Their faces, illuminated by their phone screens, were masks of pure terror. "Did you guys hear that?" one of them whispered into the darkness. Before anyone could answer, the scream came again, this time sounding closer, more desperate. It was a sound of pure agony, a long, drawn-out shriek that seemed to come from the deep, dark valley below their campsite. They were completely isolated, miles from the nearest road, with no one to call for help. One of the friends, a guy named Ben, had the instinct to start recording on his phone, pointing it into the black abyss from which the sounds were originating. The video captures nothing but darkness, but the audio is the stuff of nightmares. You can hear the raw, unfiltered terror in their whispered voices as they try to figure out what they're hearing. What is that? A mountain lion? One asks, but another quickly dismisses it. No animal sounds like that. The screams continue intermittently for nearly 20 minutes, each one sending a fresh wave of fear through the group. They huddled together, armed with nothing but a camp axe and a small flashlight, listening as the horrifying sounds eventually faded, leaving them in a silence that was now filled with dread. This next encounter feels like it was ripped straight out of a horror movie. A solo vlogger, who we'll call Alex, was documenting his multi-day trek through a vast national park. His channel was all about wilderness survival and the beauty of solitude. On the third day of his trip, however, he started to get the unnerving feeling that his solitude was an illusion. It began subtly. He'd hear a twig snap behind him, but when he turned, there was nothing there. He'd catch a fleeting movement in his peripheral vision only to find it was just the wind rustling the leaves. He tried to dismiss it as paranoia, the forest playing tricks on his mind after days of being alone. But the feeling of being watched grew stronger, more persistent. It was a cold, prickling sensation on the back of his neck that he just couldn't shake. That evening, while setting up his camp and filming a segment for his vlog, he decided to review some of the footage he had shot earlier in the day. He was looking for scenic B-roll, but what he found made his stomach drop. There, in the background of a shot where he was talking to the camera, was a figure. It was partially obscured by trees, standing far back on the trail, just watching him. It was motionless, and because of the distance, Alex couldn't make out any details, but it was undeniably a person. His paranoia was instantly validated. He wasn't alone out here. Someone had been following him, perhaps all day. He quickly scanned the woods around his new campsite, his heart racing. He grabbed his largest flashlight and his camera and began filming again, this time not for his vlog, but as a potential record of what was happening. He narrated his discovery in a hushed, panicked voice, panning the camera into the dark woods surrounding him. In the footage, you can see his hand shaking as he shines the beam between the trees. He never saw the figure again that night, but he didn't sleep a wink, sitting with his back against a tree, waiting for the sun to rise so he could pack up and hike out as fast as he could. When you go camping, you accept that you're entering the territory of wild animals. You take precautions, store your food properly, and hope for the best. But for one family, the Millers, a peaceful evening at their campsite turned into a chaotic and terrifying fight for survival. They were camping in a designated campground surrounded by other families and felt relatively safe. They were sitting around the fire, roasting marshmallows with their two young kids, with a camera set up on a tripod to capture the happy family memories. The evening was perfect, until it wasn't. Out of the darkness, with no warning, a large black bear charged into their campsite. The scene, caught entirely on camera, descends into absolute chaos. One moment there's laughter, and the next there are screams. The father, John, instinctively jumps up and puts himself between the bear and his family, yelling and waving his arms to try and scare the animal away. The bear, however, is not deterred. It's focused on the cooler full of food sitting next to the picnic table. It swats the cooler, sending it flying, and begins to tear it apart. The mother, Lisa, grabs the children and rushes them towards the safety of their minivan, her panicked shouts audible on the recording. John continues to try and distract the bear, banging pots and pans together, making as much noise as humanly possible. The bear, agitated and aggressive, turns its attention from the food to him. It rises up on its hind legs, letting out a deafening roar. It's a truly heart-stopping moment captured in frightening detail. The bear lunges and John has to scramble backward, tripping over a camp chair. For a terrifying second, it looks like the bear is going to pounce. But just then, the noise from neighboring campers who have come running with flashlights and air horns is enough to finally spook the animal. It drops back to all fours and disappears back into the woods as quickly as it appeared, leaving behind a wrecked campsite and a traumatized family. Our fifth story takes a turn from earthly threats to something far more mysterious. It comes from a pair of amateur astronomers, brothers named Kevin and Leo. who had specifically camped out in a remote desert location known for its clear, dark skies. They had telescopes, high-definition cameras, and were hoping to capture some stunning images of the Milky Way. As the night deepened and the stars came out in their full glory, they got what they came for, and then some. While filming a long exposure shot of the night sky, Kevin noticed something on his camera's display that wasn't a star or a satellite. It was a light, and it was moving erratically. He called Leo over, and they both watched, mesmerized and confused. A small, bright orb of light was zipping across the sky, making impossibly sharp turns and sudden stops. It moved with a speed and agility that defied any known aircraft. They quickly abandoned their astrophotography and aimed all their cameras at the strange object. The resulting footage is baffling. You can see a distinct point of light maneuvering in ways that are simply not possible for a plane, helicopter, or drone. It would hover silently for a few moments, then shoot across a vast expanse of the sky in an instant. Then things got even stranger. The single orb was suddenly joined by two others, which appeared out of nowhere. The three lights began moving in unison, forming a perfect triangular formation. They hovered silently above the distant mountains for several minutes, a silent, glowing enigma against the black canvas of the desert sky. Kevin and Leo are audible on the recording, their voices a mixture of excitement and pure disbelief, trying to rationalize what they are seeing. Just as suddenly as they appeared, the lights blinked out one by one, plunging the desert back into darkness and leaving the two brothers staring at the sky, questioning everything they thought they knew about what's up there. There is nothing quite as unsettling as stumbling upon a place that has been abandoned in a hurry. Our final story comes from a hiker named Jessica, who was on a solo trek deep in the backcountry. She was following a lesser-known trail when she smelled the faint scent of campfire smoke. Thinking she might be nearing another hiker, she felt a sense of relief. But as she got closer, the smell grew stale and an eerie silence hung in the air. When she broke through the trees into a small clearing, she found a campsite. But it was immediately clear that something was very, very wrong. A tent was set up, but the flap was unzipped and flapping in the breeze. Jessica called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" But her voice was swallowed by the silence. Cautiously, she approached the campsite. A fire pit was filled with blackened, half-burnt logs, cold to the touch. A sleeping bag was unrolled inside the tent, and a backpack was lying next to it, partially open. It looked as if someone had just gotten up and walked away, intending to come right back. But as she looked closer, a chill ran down her spine. A plate of food sat on a log, now covered in insects, and a book lay face down in the dirt, its pages warped by morning dew. It was a scene frozen in time, abandoned mid-activity. Feeling a growing sense of dread, Jessica decided to film the scene on her phone, both as a record and to show the park rangers. As she panned around the site, she noticed something that sealed her fear. Scratched into the dirt near the tent were two words: "Don't stay." It was a clear, desperate warning. Who wrote it? The person who had been camping here? And what were they warning against? Jessica didn't wait to find out. The footage shows her backing away slowly, her breathing quick and panicked before she turns and practically runs back the way she came. She later reported the site to the authorities, but to this day, what happened to the camper who left that sinister message remains a mystery. And there you have it, 6 stories that peel back the serene veneer of the great outdoors to reveal the unsettling possibilities that can lurk in the shadows. From human threats to unexplained phenomena, these encounters, all captured on camera, are a powerful reminder that we are never truly in control when we venture into the wild. The world is vast and full of mysteries, and sometimes those mysteries find us when we are at our most vulnerable, huddled in a thin nylon tent, miles from help, with only the darkness for a companion. It forces us to ask ourselves, what would we do in that situation? How would we react when faced with the unexplainable or the undeniably terrifying? So the next time you find yourself setting up camp and listening to the sounds of the night, remember these stories. Be aware of your surroundings, trust your instincts, and always stay alert. That strange feeling, that sound that doesn't belong, it might be more than just your imagination. The wilderness holds ancient secrets, and it doesn't always welcome visitors. Make sure you respect its power and always, always have a plan. Your safety should be the most important piece of gear you pack. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had a creepy or unexplainable experience while camping? A moment that made your blood run cold and had you packing up in the middle of the night? Share your own scary camping stories in the comments below. Reading through them is one of my favorite things to do, and it reminds us all that we're not alone in these experiences. Thank you for joining me in the strange and scary. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you in the next video.